And welcome back, and this is the 27th of March, higher plus 5 a day. Now, before I zoom in, I can see what looks like a histogram and a horrible graphing distance type thing, but let's have a go anyway and see what comes up. Right, what do we have? So we start not too bad. We start with a functions question. So this is a composite functions question because it wants me to combine g and f. And of course, the point here, it wants you to know that you do g to f of x. In other words, I'm going to do g to f of x, which is x plus 3. And what does g do? Well, g squares whatever's in the bracket, so therefore it's just going to be x plus 3 all squared. You could, of course, expand this to x squared plus 6x plus 9, but either of those things will be fine unless it tells you otherwise. Next question. Okay, now, as I thought, it's a gradient question. Calculate an estimate of the gradient of the curve at the point x equals 3. Now, as I have said multiple times before, I'm doing this on an iPad, just so you know, so I don't have a ruler. I'm doing this best efforts. So what I'm trying to do is I want to draw as accurate as I can, I'm doing a terrible job to start, a line that matches the gradient of the curve at that point. So I have to say I've done a really poor job of that, but let's go with that anyway, because that's going to be close enough. As long as you understand the method in the exam, do a better job than I've done. Now I'm going to need these points here. So this first point is, each one's 0.2, so it looks like 0.4. Doesn't matter if I'm super precise. 0.4 against 30. Now the longer the line, the more slightly inaccurate it can be, because it means it sort of spreads out over time. And this point here is 5, and that is it 5? Let's call it 4.5. Let's be over precise, having said not to be precise. Then I need the gradient of that line. So it's going to be 4.5 minus 30, because it's going to be negative. So 4.5 minus 30 divided by 5 minus 0.4. Calculator out. And that gives me minus 5.54. Remember, that's a negative. Now, that is way too accurate. I mean, in reality, again, my line was not great. I suspect anything between minus 5 and 7, or minus 5 and minus 7 is probably fine. I would definitely have done a better job of doing that if I was doing this in an exam. But as long as you know the method, you know how to reproduce it, that is okay. Right, next part. Find an estimate of the area between the curve and the x-axis between 0 and x equals 5. Okay, I'm going to have to delete what I've got, only because otherwise it's going to be hard to see what I'm doing. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it in red so you can just see what I'm doing, is I'm going to split it into 5 sections. And then I'm going to calculate the area of each of those 5 sections, assuming each of those sections is a trapezium. So let me draw it. Technically that's a triangle, but trapezium triangle is just a trapezium with a 0 for one side. Right, so there we go. Now, in order to do this, I'm going to need the y values at each point. Now, let me just zoom in, because I think that 25 is in the wrong place. Yes, it is. Okay, so this value here is 20. I just need the y values. That's 25. That's 24. That's 21. Again, it doesn't matter so much if I'm slightly inaccurate, because I'm doing this to show you, as long as you get it right in the exam. That's 12. I think that's probably 16, actually. Let's call that 16 again. Doesn't really matter. This one looks like 9, and this one looks like 0. So point is, I've now got my y values. Now, if we take this one in the middle here, so we're going to call it A, B, and C, just so you know what I'm doing. So A, B, C, D, and E. My method is going to be, if we look at C overall, I'm going to do the area of a trapezium, which is a half, times the height, which is the difference between here and here, which is 1, so the trapezium is on their side, times by the sum of the y values either side, so 21 plus 16. And I'm going to do that for each of the trapeziums. So if I write this one out, now I'm going to at this stage, because just rather than you see me do lots of writing, I'm just going to write it out. The video will speed on and then you'll see the answers. And 4.5, which if I add all that up on my calculator, I get 82.5. What are the units? Does it say units anywhere? It doesn't actually say units, does it? So 82.5 units squared, whatever units might be. And that's it. Question done. I did obviously jump through that bit there, so make sure you're okay with what I've done. I've basically worked out the area of the different trapeziums. For number E, I've called E a trapezium. Obviously, it's a triangle, but a trapezium with one side 0 is a triangle, so it's the same idea. Add them up, work them out carefully, and I get a total of 82.5 meters or centimeters or whatever it is I'm working out. And that is it. Question done. Do let me know if you're not sure what I've done there. I'll reply back to you, but definitely a skill that you need to know for your exam. Right, final question. Here we go again. So the histogram shows the heights of 2,400 sunflowers, find an estimate of the median. Now, first thing I need to do is just check this frequency density makes sense. So I'm going to do the class width. So for example, here, that's 75 times the height, which is 8. So calculator out. So 75 times 8 is going to give me 600. Now, similarly here, this class width for B, so this is my B here, is going to be 50, and that's 50 times 16. So that is going to give me 800. The class width for C, or the third one, is 25. 25 times 20 is going to give me 500. And the final one, I go from 150 to 250, which is 100, so that's nice and easy. And then 100 times, what is that? That's 5, 6, 7, 8, so that's 5, isn't it? So this is going to be 500. Now, if I add all these numbers up, so 600, so calculator it again, so 600 plus 800 plus 500 plus 500, I do indeed get 2,400, which is the number I'm looking for, which basically was a really long way of saying the scale is correct. I'm happy with the scale. Now, this is your first video you've watched, there was a question only about 3 or 4 days ago where the scale was not correct and had to scale the scale. So do be careful of just assuming things are true. Anyway, to the actual question, I haven't started the question yet. Find an estimate of the median. Well, the estimate of the median is going to be, if there's 2,400 plants, I want the 1,200th plant, in other words, halfway along. Now, if I think about my cumulative frequency, this here is the first 600 plants. And then this goes from 600 up to 600 plus 800 is 1,400. So therefore my 1,200th plant must lie somewhere in this box here. And the formula I'm going to use is a scaling formula. So I'm going to do, I want 1,200 minus the 600 that are in the beforehand, or in the A before. And then I'm going to divide that by the total amount of flowers. So I want the fraction of flowers along. I'm going to multiply that by the change in the heights from start to end. So that's going to be 125 minus 75. Again, if this is the first time you watch one of these videos, it's complicated, but once you've done this a few times, you get better at it. And then add on the starting value for that range, which is 75. I'm going to get my calculator out, very carefully put all that in, and I get 112.5. Now, sanity check. This range here, so I'm looking at B here, this starts at 75, goes to 125. 1,400 is the end, so I'm going to be most of the way across. So 112.5 feels about correct. Now, you don't do maths by feeling, but equally that feels like that's sort of a sensible-ish answer. So I'm happy with that. Okay, final part of the question. 2 sunflowers are selected at random. Calculate and estimate the probability that the sunflowers have a height of greater than 2. Actually, this one's slightly easier than the one above, isn't it? So greater than 2 are these flowers here. Now, if I assume equal distribution of flowers in the little boxes, there's 500 flowers overall, so therefore half of these flowers must be 250. So in other words, this is just a probability question. I want the probability of choosing one of the 250 from the total amount of flowers, which is 2,400. Then the second flower, so there's one less to choose, and there's one less to choose from overall, so 2,399. Get my calculator out, and well, it says 415 over 38384, but which, by the way, is fine as an answer. But I'm just going to approximate that by saying that is approximately 0.0108 or 1.08%. Again, I will write it down actually. So just as acceptable is 415 over 38384. Good question because it uses a histogram, so it uses other data. Again, good mix of questions today. I don't really like the second question, but it wasn't too bad. Functions question, people don't like functions, and the last question is using 2 different skills. So well done if you got those. Let me know how you did. Do like, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Thanks all.